So, ladies and gentlemen, let's kick off the hour by getting to some of the latest NSA revelations, shall we? We actually didn't have time to cover some fairly big NSA stories that happened last week, so let's get to them as well as some that's come out this week. So, for starters, nerds, beware. The NSA has spies in video games. That's right, gamers. Get your spy hats on. That orc you're fighting just might be a spy. Reading from a joint reporting piece by the New York Times and ProPublica, quote, not limiting their activities to the earthly realm, American and British spies have infiltrated the fantasy worlds of World of Warcraft and Second Life, conducting surveillance and scooping up data in the online games played by millions of people across the globe, according to newly disclosed classified documents. The spies have created make-believe characters to snoop and to try to recruit informers while also collecting data and contents of communications between players. End quote. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, government spies are pretending to be orcs and elves and kings and queens and princesses and ents and all types of stuff to spy on people in video games. In addition to World of Warcraft and Second Life, documents show they've infiltrated Xbox Live, which has some 48 million people in that network. So what exactly can they do when they're spying in the video game world? Reading from the Snowden document, quote, GVEs, which stand for Games and Virtual Environments, GVEs are an opportunity. We can use games for CNE exploits, social network analysis, human targeting, ID tracking, photos, doc IDs, shaping activities, geolocation of target, and collection of communications, end quote. I mean, look, I know, I jokingly at the very beginning of this said, nerds beware. But in addition to nerds and gamers, actually I'd say parents beware. If you have kids who are playing these video games, these spy agents might actually be chatting up with your kid, getting and storing your kid's photos from a video game, getting their geolocation from a video game. Look, now we don't know the actual number of spies in these video game virtual worlds. We don't know the actual number. However, the Washington Post actually reports there are actually so many spooks and spies in these gaming worlds, from the NSA, from the FBI, from the CIA, from British intelligence. There's so many spies in these virtual gaming worlds that a document actually said that they needed a deconfliction group. So what exactly does that mean, deconfliction? So a deconfliction group means, that all of us spies here, say you're a spy, all of us spies here need to let each other know that Bobby the orc and Tammy the elf and Chet the prince of the slug people, or whatever virtual identity you want to create, all of these mythical creatures and magical creatures are spies, so therefore each of these agencies don't end up catching other spies up in their virtual spy sting operations. Crazy, right? This is insane. So because I don't know about you, but don't you hate it when you create a giant, great avatar of an ent, one of the big tree people in the Lord of the Rings? Don't you hate it when you have your giant ent avatar and spend all of this time talking to a dwarf and getting the dwarf to talk about a jihad, and then you have this great jihad conversation between an ent and a dwarf? Don't you hate it when you find out that the dwarf is actually another spy? You thought you were actually doing something, but the dwarf is another spook along with you. Don't you hate that? I mean, look, by the way, this goes without saying, but there is still no evidence. There is no evidence that this gaming spying has caught any terrorists at all yet. But it's another example of the greater NSA picture. You know what I mean? That when it comes to information and data, they want all of it. All of it. Elves and dwarves and ents and all, they want all of the data, no matter what, no matter how ridiculous. Another NSA story came out That's also another one that's a bit of a precautionary tale, frankly. This one is actually from Glenn Greenwald, Ryan Gallagher, and Ryan Grimm at the Huffington Post. Reading from HuffPo, quote, "The National Security Agency has been gathering records of online sexual activity and evidence of visits to pornographic websites as part of a proposed plan to harm the reputations of those whom the agency believes are radicalizing others through incendiary speeches." Pretty damning, right? They're actually getting they're looking at the porn. But to be fair, going back to the document, to be fair to the NSA. To be fair, though, the document provided by NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden identifies 6 targets, all Muslims, as exemplars of how personal vulnerabilities can be learned through electronic surveillance and then exploited to undermine a target's credibility, reputation, and authority. None of the 6 individuals who were targeted by the NSA are actually accused of being involved in any terror plots. These aren't supposed terrorists. They're people who are giving speeches, supposedly. And the agency believes that all 6 currently reside outside the U.S. However, one of them is identified as a U.S. person, which means he's either, according to the Huffington Post, means he's either a citizen, a U.S. citizen, or a permanent resident. So, look, this is what they can do here. This is what they're doing when they're gathering and storing every bit of communication that we have online, all of our communications. Sure, all 6 of those people listed in this specific NSA document were overseas, but that type of blackmail has already happened in our own recent history in our country. Hell, this is not a new story. The FBI spied on and attempted to blackmail Martin Luther King Jr. on his infidelities. That happened. This is stuff that has happened in a much lesser scale here in the United States. It has happened here. It can easily happen again, especially with this type of technological capabilities. It makes that type of exploitation much, much more easy to do without any accountability. And there's more. The Washington Post has actually had a bunch of great, amazing NSA stories over the past week or two. One we talked about before is the first story that came out was the bulk collection of phone data. Well, there's actually some new info on bulk collection of cell data that came out about a week and a half ago. Reading from the Washington Post, quote, "The National Security Agency is gathering nearly 5 billion records a day on the whereabouts of cell phones around the world, according to top secret documents and interviews with U.S. intelligence officials, enabling the agency to track the movements of individuals and map their relationships in ways that would have previously been unimaginable. The records feed a vast database that stores information about the location of at least hundreds of millions of devices, according to officials and documents which were provided by former NSA contractor Edward Snowden. New projects created to analyze that data have provided the intelligence community with what amounts to a mass surveillance tool." End quote. So let's go back to the stats of this. 5 billion phone records a day. That's billion with a B. 5 billion that feed into a database that stores the locations of at least hundreds of millions of devices. And like I said, this goes back to the big picture, the fact that they want everything. They want it all. This project is called Co-Traveler. Doesn't that sound nice? Doesn't that sound great? Don't we all want a co-traveler in life? I have my wife. She's my co-traveler in my life. But this isn't that type of co-traveler. This is a secret co-traveler that watches us and records us wherever we go and whatever we do. Reading again from the Post about co-traveler. Co-traveler, quote, "and related tools require the methodical collection and storage of location data on what amounts to a planetary scale. The government is tracking people from afar into confidential business meetings or personal visits to medical facilities, hotel rooms, private homes, and other traditionally protected places." End quote. Like we've said when we talked about this before, metadata can show almost everything. Again, it's not even the content of conversations, it's who you're having those conversations with that the metadata actually shows. In a response to this report and this exposed documents, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence General Counsel, a man named Robert Litt, said, "There is no element of the intelligence community that under any authority is intentionally collecting bulk cell phone data information about cell phones in the United States." End quote. Well, doesn't that make you feel better? Doesn't that make you feel great? But here's the rub on that. Here's the rub. Intentionally. That's what it's about, intentionally. We may be collecting bulk cell phone locations about Americans. We may be doing that, but we're not doing it intentionally. It's an accident. Whoops. I mean, and there's an angle that we've actually talked about when we talked about the NSA before on the show, about how the NSA, in their sick and twisted mind, supposedly think what they're doing is, quote, legal, right? And that's the fact that they're getting a lot of this actual data from overseas, and actually they're getting America's data off of the American continent, and so therefore they think it's legal. On to that, reading again from the Washington Post, quote, "An intelligence lawyer speaking with his agency's permission said location data are obtained by methods tuned to be looking outside the United States, a formulation he repeated 3 times. When U.S. cell phone data are collected," he said, "the data are not covered by the Fourth Amendment, which protects Americans against unreasonable searches and seizures." End quote. Again, so because in their head they're looking for data outside the U.S., they're looking outside the U.S., any U.S. data that they get is fair game to be sucked up in their gigantic worldwide vacuum. Hell, the Washington Post had yet another story on how the NSA and the GCHQ, which is the British version of the NSA, are actually using computer cookies, particularly a Google Pref cookie, to track people. Not only are they using cookies, reading from the Washington Post again, quote, "In addition to tracking web visits, this cookie allows the NSA to single out an individual's communication among the sea of internet data in order to send out software that can hack that person's computer. The slides say the cookies are used to, quote, enable remote exploitation, although the specific attacks used by the NSA against targets are not addressed in these documents," end quote. Again, this is another great story from the Washington Post. That same Post article reports on another way that the NSA is actually spying. It's another slide indicates that the NSA is collecting location data transmitted by mobile apps to support the ad buying. They're getting that data in bulk as well. So that NSA program, which is called Happyfoot actually helps map internet addresses even further than the cell phone stuff. It's so crazy. And what do we mean by we said exploitation, right? It enables remote exploitation. What exactly does that mean? Because we talked about how the NSA is supposedly using at least some Muslims' porn habits to discredit them. What are other ways that this exploitation can happen? Well, the Washington Post actually had another pretty big bombshell. This was actually in a story about the FBI. It actually shows how the FBI in this story installs malware on users' computers. It also reported that the FBI for years has had the ability to secretly activate the camera on your computer or laptop, without the light coming on to letting you know that it's on and recording. They actually have that ability to turn the camera on without you knowing it. That's pretty frightening. That's pretty scary. You maybe have you might be listening to this on a computer. Is your light on? It's probably not. You know what? But it still might be on because the FBI has that ability. And so I guess that's the question is the big question that we talk about when we talk about the NSA and this massive surveillance. And that question is this the type of world that we want to live in, where anyone can be easily spied upon without a warrant, where our children can be spied upon? What if the NSA rep turns on the president's webcam or a senator's webcam? And just the ability and ease of unaccountable corruption and blackmail and exploitation of these abilities, the true amount of this is really, really endless. Do we want to live in that world? And I know I don't. So the question is, what exactly are we going to do to stop it? We'll be right back.